Hey, everybody. It is Friday, and that means it's another episode of There's No Crying in Crochet, the podcast where we solve all your everyday crochet problems and make it fun at the same time. I'm Debbie from Madam Stitch, and this is my cohort in crime.
I am Biz from Busy Crochet. Glad you guys are here.
And we are here to help you with some crochet skills today. So super excited about this one. This is one of my passions. So we're going to give you the 411. But before we do that, we have business to take care of. Right, Biz? All right, here we go. Subscribe to our YouTube channels. What are you waiting for? Busy Crochet and Madam Stitch Crochet. Because I just put up a 3-part tutorial for one of my cows this week and, trying to get caught up on the things I've released and didn't get the tutorials done. So that's all happening. So there's lots of stuff going on with that. All right. And if you happen to be watching on Facebook today, make sure you give StreamYard, our streaming service, permission to display your name, because we love to call you by name. We're not going to call you out and embarrass you. We're going to make you feel welcome. So I love to see your name. So does Biz. It's fabulous.
So hi, Joanne, first of all, because you put a comment in way before we even started. So
I know. I love it. I love it. All right. So let's see here. All right, Biz, you've been sharing with me what's up this week. What is going? Give us the abridged version of what's going on with you this week.
The 911 is what it's turning into. I've never had a computer program make me feel so stupid in all my life, but Adobe Photoshop is really hard. And so is Adobe Illustrator. And those are the two systems I'm learning this week. And it took me 3 days to figure out how to colorize a black and white picture. So while it took me 3 days, I finally have it. I know how to do it now. Yay me. So hopefully the rest of this particular project goes smoothly, because not only do I have to do 3 different color schemes of colorizing this picture in Photoshop, but I also have to do it in Illustrator. So a big assignment. Yes. And so just with me luck, I need it. Things need to connect up here in a better way than they have been.
No, those are really difficult programs. If anyone listening has ever tried to even attempt Photoshop or Illustrator, I finally gave up on Photoshop, and I'm just using some things that are a little bit simpler. And when we get to our subject today, you'll see my work in Illustrator, but I'm going to tell you, it took loads of video tutorials and loads of experimenting and loads of hair pulling to figure out how to do what I do with Illustrator. Oh my goodness. They're hard. They're really hard.
I don't doubt it. I can't say that I am looking forward to it because I'm learning things. And I was telling Deb before we'd started this, that I think given enough time, I will be confident in these things. But because I'm taking my classes online, we have an 8-week term, and things are moving at a pretty hefty clip. And my brain just is not moving at the same pace as the class. And so just, I just need for everything to click and come together.
Well, we have every confidence that will happen, Ms. Biz.
Yes.
So, more power to you, darling.
But hi to Linda and Carolina. Thanks for joining us today. And I keep turning caps lock on.
Biz, don't scream at our guests, please.
Oh!
And I'm just going to kind of pass on what's up this week, because it's kind of been boring, but boring good.
Like
boring.
Rinse, repeat.
Yeah. My daughter owns a house close to us now, and so this is her first fall having to deal with leaves and things like that, and we're sort of in the thick of the last of the leaves coming down.
Yeah.
So my husband and dog went over last Saturday and helped her rake leaves. Not that she doesn't know how, but
that's a workout.
Her property is big enough that one person, it could be quite overwhelming. So we went and had a party out in the leaves. Yay. So it was fun. If you check out my Instagram feed, you'll see a video of what we did. So it was great. All right. I think it's time for us to get started. What do you think, Biz?
Definitely, we should do that.
All right.
Because today's
this one is near and dear to my heart. Every month we try to do a crochet skills class, and we've covered a lot of the things that are common problems or common things we should know. But this one for today, I think, is one that a lot of people poo-poo because it's something you kind of have to learn, like learning how to read patterns. So today's crochet skills class is read crochet charts with confidence. Now, I'm going to give a little disclaimer here, because much like working with Photoshop and Illustrator, it takes time to get proficient at reading charts. It's not just a once and done. So today's episode will be a let's get you started, see where you can go with that. But we're going to give you the 411 on everything to do with charts. And we're going to start off with why we think it's important that you know how to read charts. Like I said, a lot of people don't think it's necessary, and you can get away in your entire crochet career never learning to read charts. But Biz, why do you read charts? Do you like to use charts?
Yeah, so I ended up having to learn how to read charts because of there was a pattern I wanted to make, but it only came in a chart. And so I made myself learn how to do it so that I could make this pattern. And I think that's one of the first things that you have written down here is that you can access global patterns easier if you know how to read charts, because so many of them, like I know for Japan for sure, a lot of the Slovakian countries, Russian, a lot of them do straight up. Germany does like straight up charts for their patterns, and it behooves you to make that part of your repertoire, because then you can do anything you run into. If you fall in love with something and it only comes in a chart and you're like, oh man, well, I don't know how to read a chart. So,
well, let's back up for just a second, because for those who might not know, what is a crochet chart? So at its very core, it is a visual representation of the written instructions. So using symbols that we'll talk about a little bit later, it shows you if it's a full chart. I wish I could show you the blanket that I did. A client of mine, I tested for her. She has a chart for the entire blanket.
Wow.
Oh, holy cow. It's pretty intense. But most of the time you'll get a square for a chart for a square, or a motif, or a pattern. And it should look like what the pattern or the stitch looks like. So that's really what it is. In a crochet chart, all of the stitches are represented by symbols. So slip stitch has a symbol, chain has a symbol, all of the stitches, all of the special techniques, all of them have symbols. And much like letters, many of the basic stitches have universal symbols that you'll find anywhere and everywhere. When you start to get into the specialty stitches, like working in the third loop, or if a designer has created a stitch especially for that pattern, and they include a chart, they will have to create a symbol that represents that stitch. So you kind of have to rely on keys and things like that. But it's especially useful if you have intricate patterns. The simple stuff, I include them in most of my simpler patterns just because. And it's a great way to get started learning how to read charts, because you have the written instructions next door.
Well,
right. So
the symbols themselves, are they universal? Are they the same for everyone? So like, even if a pattern were in a different language, the chart's going to have the same kind of symbols in it, right?
Most of the time, yes. There are variations. I didn't go into that in the presentation, but there are variations. And like I said, if there are special stitches that you create or that they're not common.
Yeah.
I can't think of one off the top of my head, but there are some that aren't as commonly used that you might find a designer putting her own spin on it. But it'll be close. But if you're talking about basic stitches, single crochet, double crochet, all of that kind of stuff, they do have, everybody uses the same symbol.
Yeah, Neve had actually put up a comment here. I can't click on it, but she's talking about the difference between UK and US patterns, because that's where a lot of us have a tendency to work in. It doesn't matter whether you're doing a single crochet, which is a double crochet in UK, or a double crochet, which is a half treble in UK. The symbol itself is the same.
Right. So let's dive into that a little bit further, Neve, because if you're using a UK terminology pattern and it calls for a double crochet, the chart would show you the symbol for what we in the US identify as a single crochet. So yes, I hadn't even thought about that. Thank you, Neve. I hadn't even thought about that being a helpful purpose for crochet charts is, you know, going between terminologies. So Biz, you had already mentioned access to global patterns. If something's in a different language and they have a chart, it's possible that you can figure out how to make it from that chart.
Yeah, the pattern that I ended up finding online was written in German or Dutch, can't remember, but it was impossible for me to figure out what, like, the, you know, what translates into what, but she had a chart there and I was able to wiggle it out with that, and it was really, really helpful. And that was the first time that I'd ever really used one, and it was from that point on where if I see a chart, I'll a lot of times challenge myself to see if I can actually do it. And the other thing too, and not to jump ahead, but a lot of the books, like the book or Stitch Bibles and stuff like that, have charts in them now. So it really helps you to be able to, because if you're struggling to read, some of these instructions are like paragraphs long. If you're struggling to figure out, it's easy. It's wonderful to be able to see a sample of the work itself in front of you.
We try really hard not to have mountains of instructions for one row, but sometimes you just absolutely can't avoid it, and the chart really helps. For those who are visual learners, so I've been teaching about a gazillion years, and one of the things that I've always had to deal with is the difference between a visual learner and a written learner. And the beauty of a crochet chart is if you need to see it, then it's much easier to understand, especially if you've got those written instructions along with it.
Yeah, without having to rely on a video tutorial to teach you how to do something.
Right. Sometimes that video tutorial goes too fast, or you can't catch all the steps. So you really need to rely on that crochet chart to help you. The crochet chart shows you the structure. So how all of the stitches fit together, where to place them. There, a lot of times reading the written instruction, it will say something like single crochet in the next stitch. That's a really simplistic instruction, but where is that next stitch? Right? And the chart will show you where that is.
Well, and I'm just gonna, I have a pattern that I'm working on right now that has some questionable stuff in it, where it says to treble crochet 2 rows down below the last whatever stitch you worked on or whatever. And in a chart or something like that, it would show you, you can literally count exactly where you're supposed to put it. And that's why they're ingenious. They're helpful.
Yeah, I love that part of it. It makes you a more versatile crocheter. We already talked about this, right? So if you know how to read crochet charts, it opens up I would argue it opens up more difficult, more challenging, a higher skill level of crochet project, because you have more than just the written instructions to help you out.
Yeah, for sure.
You don't have as many errors, we hope, right? Because you can compare the written instructions to the chart and vice versa. So
I mean, I'm not going to say that I've not made mistakes watching a chart as well. But I will say that it's easier for me to catch my mistakes, only because I can look at what I've worked and I can look at that chart and go, oh, that doesn't match up there.
That doesn't look right.
So,
I find it an invaluable tool. We talked about the efficiency in complex designs, especially effective for joining methods beyond the norm. So, for instance, I use charts sometimes when I use the join as you go method, and will show where those stitches are joined in what spaces and that sort of thing. It helps for that. You know, I would think, I've never tried it, Biz, but the Celtic join, which is isn't that the one where you chain and you attach and then you chain some more and you attach, and then the next square comes along and works into that chain, and they hook up into the chains rather than into spaces?
I don't know if that's what it's called or not. I think I've always called that one like a trellis. Because
something like that.
Yeah. Because is that the one that bounces back and forth between? Yeah,
but it uses chains instead, and so it has this braided effect.
Yeah,
I've been dying to try that, but I haven't been courageous enough yet. So we'll see.
Yeah,
maybe I'll do a chart for that.
With there being just a single crochet holding that little spot together, because
that is a.
I put a whole half of a sweater together like that, and it looks really cool. I'm praying to God that it's still holding together, because that's one of those things you've got to just let go of that. But yeah.
Well, and the last point, as far as benefits are concerned, I don't know about you. I think, Biz, you are like me. I'm always looking for projects to challenge me. I have gotten to the skill level I am by trying things. And if you've got a chart that shows you how to work those complex written instruction, those complex techniques, it helps to develop your crochet skills. It gives you the ability, to do more difficult things.
Yeah.
Let's see here. All right. Let's start our presentation. So what I did was put together some visual things so we could kind of talk about some of the things that you'll see in charts and give you some things that you can take away. So we are doing reading crochet charts. Let me remind you that there's a little box at the bottom of your video, of your window, that looks like a broken up square. That is full screen. If you put it on full screen, you'll be able to see these a little bit better, because some of these charts are a little bit hard to see. But if we put that in full screen, you should be able to see it. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is just show you a couple of examples of what they look like. Okay. So the one on the right is it's not a granny square. It's a square motif, and it's basically all done in double crochets and treble crochets. And with this one, you can see examples of some of the stitches that are used in it. Very basic. This is in US crochet terminology. Slip stitch, double crochet, chain, and treble crochet. And then on the left this is really interesting. I did this pattern test for a designer. This is a Mobius cowl. And what you're seeing there, it's kind of hard to see, but if you have it in full screen, you'll notice that the row starts in kind of in the middle where you see the numbers, and you're actually working around the corner and coming back. So the center is where you start. You work the first row round all the way around and then come back in the blue. Yeah, it's really intricate, but it was so much fun to work. Yeah, it's very interesting. So those are examples of a couple
of. It's a good example if you look at the in the chart itself. It gives arrows. There are arrows telling you which direction you should be working in.
Exactly.
Like, the other one, it has the basic numbers, and we all know that we're working in a circle basically there. But if you're working in something that works back and forth, a lot of times they will have arrows pointing, or they'll have the row 1 on one side, row 2 on the other side, row 3 on one side. You probably have examples of that, but
I do. I do, as a matter of fact. Right. So those are a couple of examples. So let's start off by talking about the symbols. All right. So the purpose of the symbols is to basically represent, kind of in stick figure form, what the stitch actually looks like. Okay. So a slip stitch is represented by a dot or an opaque circle. The single crochet is represented by either by an X or a cross. And the half double crochet is just a stick with a cross at the top. None of those have any yarn overs in them. But when you get to the double crochet, that has a bar across the, I'm blanking on what I want to call it. The stem, I guess. It has the
post.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, Lord, have mercy upon me. That's okay. Post. Thank you. The little diagonal line that you see there represents, once you've pulled up your first loop, how many yarn overs do you have to complete the stitch? So in a double crochet, you have one yarn. Once you've pulled up the loop to start making the stitch, you have one yarn over to complete it. Okay. So in a treble crochet, there are 2 yarn overs, because let me explain that better. So but go back to a double crochet. You yarn over, insert the hook, yarn over, pull up a loop.
Yes.
This is where the symbol starts. You yarn over, pull through 1 loop, 2 loops, and then you finish the stitch. So if you look at a double crochet, there's 1 bar that sits across
in the middle,
front of the stitch. If you look at a treble crochet, you'll see 2 bars that sit across. Okay. And same with the double treble. There are 3 bars if you really look at the fabric, you can see those bars that I'm talking about. Now there's a stitch that I use that I'll show you later on that starts a row that is a substitution for a double crochet, but it has 2 bars on it, just like the treble crochet. And I'll show you the difference between that. That's one that I created myself.
Okay.
And I will show you what that looks like. But those are basic symbols. As far as I know, those are universal. So when you pick up a pattern, you should be able to recognize those. We left out the chain. The chain is an ellipse, so it's an oval. And this is just a representation of some of the things you might see. And they may not necessarily be in an arch. They may be straightened out, but chain 5 or the picot, where you are instructed to chain 3 and slip stitch back in the original chain, that's what that picot would look like. So that's another set of basic stitches. These are where we get this is where we get broader, right? So these are actually very common stitches in our repertoire, working in the around the front and back post and working in the front and back loop. So how that's represented. So Biz, quiz time.
Yes.
What? Oh gosh, it's listed there. Never mind. It's a double crochet because we have 1 bar, right?
Yes.
Oh, Lord have mercy. All right. So if the mine's going to look backward because I think I'm not mirrored, but you'll see that when it curves around to the right and then back around left, that represents going in from the front to the back to the front around the post.
Yes.
The other way represents going behind the fabric and going to the front and then back to the back to work around the back of the post. So those are the symbols for that. And that curly Q at the bottom can be attached to any stitch.
Yes.
You can work any stitch, front and back post, basically.
Yes.
And that little curve at the bottom gets added if it's a front or back post.
Yes.
What I didn't do, and I probably should have, is when you're working in the back loop, and I want to just explain how to remember this, because this is really kind of cool. When you turn your fabric toward you and you're looking at the top loop, the whole loop, if you work into the back loop only, you're inserting your hook under the part that curves up. If you're working into the front loop, you're inserting your hook into the part that curves down. And that's what those symbols represent. Working in the back loop and working in the front loop. And again, those are attached to whatever stitch you want. So Biz, in one of the patterns that I did of yours, you did single crochets in the, was that back post or front post? What did you do?
Back post, most likely. I have a tendency to use back post single crochet because it helps the it gives it texture on the front side. And so I don't usually use it in single crochets, but it is definitely possible.
Yes, and the alternative, I'll show you the symbol that I created for the half double crochet in the third loop, or working in the third loop, which is basically, it has the same effect. But that's how you identify that. I always have to kind of remind myself when I look at a chart that I didn't create what that curve means. So I have to remember that I'm looking at the loop that sits on the top of the fabric, and the way it curves for back or front loop is what I'm looking at.
Well, and I have a tendency to think of things in terms of it's going away from me, so it's in the back, or it's coming towards me, so it's in the front.
Truth. Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. Okay. This is a stitch key. So with every, well, this is not necessarily true. With every chart, there should be a stitch key, but you're going to see an example later on. If you're working with Japanese or Russian charts, there won't be a stitch key. You better know what you're looking at. But a stitch key basically shows you what every symbol means. Okay. This is fairly self-explanatory. Let's look at the half double crochet in the third loop first of all. Now I created this one myself. I don't know if it's the most accurate representation, but what it does, that little ellipse at the bottom represents that loop that gets pushed forward when you work in the third loop. There may be other symbols out there for that. If there are, you just want to check the stitch key and see what the designer has decided to use. That's kind of a non-standard symbol at the moment. Let's see. Oh, look at the puff. All right, so you'll notice that there are, if you can see it, there are 6 lines, 3 on each side. That's my standard puff. That's yarn over, insert, yarn over 3 times. So you'll have you actually have 7 loops on your hook. But the original hook, the 7th loop, is actually the one you started with. So the puff consists of those 6 loops that you pulled up. And then it's finished off. If I finish it off with a chain, I will put a chain symbol at the top. That line for me means that I'm simply pulling through all the loops and gathering it together.
Another thing too, I don't know if you have any examples of them, of like the where there are oh geez Louise, what is it called, popcorn stitches? Do you have any examples in
Well, no, I thought
Okay.
I had
No, that's
put.
fine. The only thing I was going to say is that when you see a popcorn stitch or something like that, because sometimes you'll have a 3 double crochet puff or a 3 double crochet cluster or something like that, it's going to have those hash marks that you see on the double crochets.
Yep.
On the puff, it's going to have those hash marks in there if they want you to actually make like yarn over, pull up, yarn through 2, and then do that again,
Yeah,
and then pull it all
exactly.
together to make 1. So just be aware that not all of the things that are like a texture stitch are going to be nice and smooth like that. A lot of times they will have that indicator in there of using.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's one of the ones that I left off, but cluster stitches, 3 double crochet worked in the same. So actually, if you look at the granny stitch, you can kind of imagine the granny stitch is just 3 double crochet worked in the same stitcher space. If that were a 3 double crochet bobble, it would curve around. It would look more like the puff stitch.
It would
They would
look
be
like
curved and joined at the top.
it would just have those
Yeah,
hash marks in there. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. Now, I mentioned the stacked single crochet, which I use instead of a turning chain. And what I did was the stacked single crochet, you can check out my video on YouTube, but it's basically working a single crochet in the space where the stitch where you're starting, and then using the left hand bar of that single crochet to create another single crochet on top. Now you'll notice in this one, I've separated those 2 hash marks instead of having them together. That distinguishes it from the treble crochet. If I had those 2 stitches in the same pattern or in the same chart, you would have to see, okay, are those hash marks together or are they separated? And the single crochet, the stacked single crochet, basically just happens at the beginning of a round or a row. So it's not really applicable anywhere else in the chart. But that's a symbol I made up myself, as is the crossed granny stitch. All right. Well, let's see what we have coming up here. All right, so working in rows.
Action.
You were talking about working in rows, and this is actually a cowl pattern of mine that's worked in the round, but some of it is worked in the round and some of it is working in turned rounds. So you kind of get the same idea of working in rows. Rounds 4 through 6, that's what you would see if you were working in rows. So if you're on the wrong side of the fabric, you'd work round 4. You'd read the chart from left to right. If you're working on the right side of the fabric, you'd work round 5 from right to left. Same with round 6, left to right. So the arrow is showing you which direction to read the chart.
Yes.
All right. And I actually put instructions in mine how to work the repeats. In the next slide, we'll see how repeats work. So identifying those stitches, there are a lot of stitches in there. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's foundation chain, then a round of half double crochets, a round of half double crochets in the third loop, and then this really cool stitch called puffs and grannies come next, where you single crochet, chain 3, and puff in the same stitch as the single crochet. And then you skip 2 stitches and you do it again.
All right. And then you hold it all down with single crochet in the next one. Gotcha.
Correct. Yep. And then those granny stitches are worked in the chain 3s in the next round. So I put that for working in rows. I actually have another one that's a little more accurate, but this kind of shows you how you can identify which direction to read the chart.
I'm going to throw another thing out there too, because I don't know if you've got it. Do you have any charts on this where any sections are highlighted or marked out?
Yes.
Okay. Then I will keep my mouth shut and we'll go to that.
I do. Okay. There it is.
Just like that.
Okay. That's it. Yeah. So that there are actually two sets of repeats in this pattern. There's a row repeat and there's a repeat. This is a blanket. So you don't really want to be charting out everything across, because your chart would be across 2 or 3 pages and it wouldn't be, it would be functional. But in this case, it's a 14 stitch repeat, and the part that's highlighted is the part that's repeated. And in there, I tell you to repeat that 5 times, or to do it 5 times.
Yeah.
To get the entire row.
So the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because when we're looking at those stitch Bibles, almost every single one of them, you're going to see something like that, where a section of the chart is highlighted or darkened like that, so that it shows you what the repeat is. That is when you want to create a lot of times it'll say that your multiples are such and such by such and such, but you want to have a particular amount of this particular repeat. That's how many times you're going to figure out you're going to continue, or you're going to be able to get out of the oh good Lord, the multiple that you started with, because that's where you figure out how many repeats you need to do. Right. And, you know, like so it says I'm going to repeat or your multiple is a 10 plus 2. Well, the 10 usually refers to the 10 stitches in that repeat, and then you need the extra 2 in order to create the beginning chain or whatever it is you're doing. So this is where charts become super, super helpful, because it gives you an indicator of, okay, so that those 10 stitches, that's what the 10 stitches that they want me to use my multiple for, that's what they're doing.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes. Now in this chart, I didn't put arrows. I simply identified the row on which side you start. So row 1 is read from right to left. Then you turn and you work row 2, but you're reading the chart from left to right.
Right.
Correct. All right. There's that one. So that's working in rows with a repeat. That is a ripple pattern, by the way.
All right.
All right, here we go. Working in rounds. So this gets a little trickier, right? So this particular square starts with chain 4, join with a slip stitch to form a circle. And you'll notice up the center of all of those rounds, it's 4 rounds. You'll see a chain 3, which is your turning chain. And just to the right of that turning chain is the slip stitch, which is where when you come back around, you're slip stitching to the top of that turning chain. So to work this square, you start with that chain 4. The round numbers all sit to the right of the turning chain. Now we're assuming these are written for right-handers. We'll talk about this in just a second, right? So if you're a right-hander, you're going to read the chart. You're going to work the chart from counterclockwise.
Counterclockwise, yeah.
Well, and I think I have it somewhere else in here. If you're a left-hander, you're working everything in a mirror image. So you could probably flip that chart and read it clockwise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is the direction you're working, right?
Yeah, and you'll notice that that chain 3 stands for a double crochet, because each of those chains in the beginning 4 gets 3 double crochets going around. So that first chain starts as your first double crochet in that round.
Yeah, and it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that would count as 12 double crochets in that center circle. And then it builds out from there. And you'll notice that wherever, this is where I've got some tips at the end, but this is where following with your finger is kind of a good idea. You'll see in round 2 that there are multiple stitches worked into one double crochet from the previous round.
Yep.
So wherever the stem of that symbol points,
yep,
that's where it's supposed to be worked. All right, that is working in the round. Now that's very simple one. There are much more intricate ones, but that's a good place to start. That's a simple one. Yeah.
And even just familiarizing yourself with the way that it looks is going to help you.
Yes. All right. Next up, these are just examples. So on the right is a granny square, a modified granny square that starts as a circle and then becomes a square. And in that one, you'll see the numbers kind of tiny, but you'll see the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used, I think, stacked single crochets in that one instead of turning chains. Mm-hmm. But the slip stitch shows you where the end of the round is, and the numbers will show you where the beginning of the round is.
Mm-hmm. And you'll notice in that one, you use a lot of chain ones in between your double crochets for like 2 rows, and then the next row has stitches in all of those.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to watch, because I have a bad habit of like, oh, okay, there's a whole bunch. All right, so she's doing chain ones, and I'll just go to town and do chain ones, and I'll go, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't look like it. So then you got to go back. So just watch every row carefully.
But what you'll notice, I mean, this one, I don't know if I have this one. Oh, I do. I have this one handy. I don't know if you can see it or not, but the center of that, you can see the circles, the spaces where the chain spaces are. And then it gets solid out here.
Yep.
All right. And then the one on the left, I don't know how many of you have worked a triangle shawl, but they're really tough to chart, may I just say, because in the charting, things start to expand and pull apart, whereas in the actual shawl, it doesn't. Yeah. So it's really tricky to get that straight edge that you see along the bottom, and then space the stitches around that so that they're not bunching up in one place and spreading out in another.
Oh, excuse me.
That's really helpful when you've got a shawl like that. All right, those were examples. All right, here we are, Japanese crochet charts. I tried to make it as big as I could. They are tiny. You will see them on Facebook a lot. You can search on Pinterest. And this is what Russian and Japanese crochet charts look like. They're intricate. They are just, and I think these are Japanese because you'll see the symbols above each chart. They're just crazy intricate.
They are. And so many of them are so small and they're very pixelated.
Yep, they very much are. They are.
But, if you can get in there and you can see, a lot of times, just like anything else that you crochet, it's very intuitive. Mm-hmm. And if you can figure out where the chain part is, a lot of times the rest of it just falls in place.
Right. And remember the main principles of reading a crochet chart. They're usually written for right-handers, which means you're going to start a round, find where the start of the round is, and read it counterclockwise.
Yep.
And then you're going to go up to the next round and read that counterclockwise until you get to, no matter what the shape is, these are all worked in the round, regardless of square or...
Made a comment. She said, I sometimes use a highlighter on a group of stitches worked into one stitch or a chain space on the round or row below. That's another good way to keep track of where you are, is highlighting your stitches as you go through.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
That you need that might be like hidden, So
Judy asks if these charts will be available on the website. I don't make my charts available on my website. Usually those are only included in my purchased PDFs.
Patterns.
Mainly because, and this gets us into a completely different discussion about things, my copyrighted material being lifted. So I put the written instructions up there for free, but not the crochet chart.
Yeah.
It's
and the
just
crochet charts take an enormous amount of work to create.
It takes me hours. So I try, those are usually just in the premium PDF. However, I do have a downloadable resource, which I will talk about at the end of the presentation. Let's see if we got in there. Okay. So Biz, I think it's important for us to give some tips for success.
Sure.
When we're talking about reading charts.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever read aloud to yourself?
Always. Always. even in school, I am so glad that nobody's home with me during the day, because in order for me to catch what is in the book, I have to say it out loud, because one thing I've learned going back to college is that I'm a visual learner and I fall asleep when I'm reading. So I have to do it. Oh my
goodness.
So reading the charts aloud, that is a great way of, like making yourself understand what you're looking at.
Right. All of these are kind of related. So I would pair read the chart aloud with follow the flow of the stitches with your finger as you read it, and use the written instructions to check your work, right?
Yeah.
Check the stitch key for special stitches. You saw that there were some in there that weren't common ones. Just like basic stitches in reading crochet patterns, the abbreviations, memorize the stitch symbols that go with them,
right?
So that you can easily recognize those basic stitches. And then the more complicated stitches, you can check the stitch key.
Right. Then anything that looks off, you catch it faster.
Right. We always should check, identify, and practice stitches we don't know. Right? So whenever you're working a new design or a new pattern, that's just normal. So do it with the chart as well. And if you're new to working with charts, start with an easy pattern, a simple pattern that includes a chart, so that you can check yourself as you go along and just get used to working from the chart. And the written instructions are a great backup.
And even if you don't find a pattern that you like, using your stitch Bibles and going in there and reading the written instructions, looking at the multiples that are available, looking at the chart that they've made available. So many of them are very good about including extremely detailed instructions. Now, I will say, I just bought a new book because it had some like texture stitches that I didn't have in any of my other books. Come to find out, this book does not have in-depth written instructions. It's like, oh, hey, make sure you look at the chart, and then here's some extra stuff to go with it.
Oh, gosh.
There you go. Wow. I'm like, oh, my God. So
thanks so much.
I had to know how to learn how to read those charts. And I'm so glad I did know how to read the charts, because, it doesn't have any instructions in it.
Yep.
You
oh, my gosh.
Very quickly learn what you've allowed yourself to become dependent on, because I was like,
yeah,
what is
this? All right, and this goes back to what Neve said: mark off the rows and rounds as you work them, or highlight groups of stitches that are worked in one stitch, that sort of thing. Anything that gets you to the success is what you need to do.
Yep.
Have a backup, print off more copies if you need them. There's no shame in having multiple copies in case you made a mistake, whatever. But all of those are our tips, I think, for at least getting started.
Yes.
Reading charts is a skill, just like reading patterns is a skill, right? So you want to make sure that you set yourself up for success by starting simple instead of starting with the most complicated, like the Japanese charts. Don't go there. It's not necessary. They're gorgeous, but
like to make yourself cry. But but we've already determined there's no crying in crochet, so don't.
So this is why we're here, right? So, but anyway, those charts that I do are created in Illustrator, and it represented a whole lot of learning curve, but it was well worth the effort because now I have more control over the accuracy of my charts. I'm not perfect yet, or ever, I don't know, but they are definitely, it's definitely worth the time and effort. But yes, Judy, I'm sorry, I do have a downloadable resource, which I've put the link to in my description on YouTube. That's a free downloadable resource for how to read crochet charts. And there are a couple of charts and things in there that you could use.
That's really great because you and I are both sticklers for not relying on just one source or one way of doing or reading a pattern, because if you allow yourself to get stuck in, I only use videos, or I only use written patterns, or I only use charts, it behooves you. I know I said that before. It's my word of the day. It behooves you to expand yourself as much as possible, because then it makes everything accessible.
Yeah, and along those same lines, we're both big fans of stretching yourself, and it just makes you a better crocheter. Crochet charts, you could probably go through your entire crochet journey without ever learning to use them. But I highly recommend it because you never know when that one design you want to make relies on you knowing how to read a crochet chart. And it's just such a useful tool.
Baby steps. And just remember, baby steps.
Baby steps. It is a learning curve. But all right. Well, I hope that preview and overview and all of the views was enough to get you started.
Helpful, yes.
And, you know, my hope is that eventually I will have more resources on my website for how to read charts. Right now, they're fairly thin, but that's in the works.
Yay.
Yay! All right, Ms. Biz, we've wrapped it up. It's time to... What have you been watching this? I know.
Boy,
what have you been watching this week? Anything? You've been watching a whole lot of Adobe, Photoshop, and Illustrator. I know that.
I have.
Computer screen.
I literally can't remember anything that I've been watching. It's always the same stuff over and over with my family because we're working our way through the Great British Bake Off. We're working our way through a couple of trash reality TV shows. Most of it's cooking because it's that time of year. We're watching the competition show, the Summit, that one.
Right.
And Survivor, and can't remember. There's another one in there, but yeah, just nothing exciting.
It's kind of the same with us. I've barely been able to stay awake to read at night. I've been so tired, but I have to attribute it to the daylight saving time ending. I usually don't have trouble in the fall because I just go to bed later, and it usually, I don't set an alarm ever. So the sun wakes me up, which is later and whatever.
Yeah.
But I have been waking up between 5 and 6 every morning. And for the first week, I fought it tooth and nail, tried to stay in bed, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to bed at the right time. This week, I gave up and got up at 5. And I just start working. I either pull my computer out and start writing, or I work on a project and watch something. I don't know. In the morning, it's usually the news. But I cannot. I'm tired because I cannot shift my body. Spring destroys me.
Yeah.
Completely destroys me. Fall's usually fine. This time, not so much.
Yeah,
so I don't really know.
The other day that like spring, for whatever reason, when we jump forward, that throws our bodies off so bad. It takes us a week or two to catch up.
Yep.
Usually the fall back is not so bad because you gain an hour of sleep, you get an extra hour. But This time, for whatever reason, we have just been struggling through the whole thing.
Okay, so it's not just me.
No.
Thank you.
No,
well, not thank you. You know, misery loves company, but but I just cannot.
It's like sleeping a lot more too.
So I don't know what we've been watching. I will need to go back and repeat some episodes because there wasn't a whole lot of coherence in my universe at that time of the evening, but oh well, that's okay.
Well, and Stephanie's been working a lot of late hours at the daycare. And so when she comes home with the baby's very cranky usually. So she spends all of her time really getting the baby settled down for the night. My husband is usually out as soon as he eats supper, so there's not really any hanging out there. And as far as I'm concerned, I could care less. I'm so exhausted after every day with school that my brain is just absolutely mush. So I sit on my phone and play my little games. I mean, I haven't even been crocheting. Oh, that's terrible.
Well, okay, that's unacceptable, but we'll forgive you for right now. So anyway.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. You can tell it's fall because the afternoon sun is just all over the
because mine's already moved, and so
all right. Well, we've solved all the problems. Again, I hope that we've at least gotten you started with crochet charts. If you haven't done them before, if you're an expert, we'd love to hear from you. Put some knowledge in the comments for us, and we'd love to share that with our audience. But for now, we're going to say bye-bye and wish you a happy weekend and happy crochet and all the things, because we love spending our Friday afternoon with you. So, bye, everybody.
Bye.